Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here is a quote just for this episode. The state of man's mind, or the elementary phase of mind, which he so far possesses, conforms precisely to the state of the world as he so far views it. George Wilhelm Hegel. Our guest today, coach to the greats, futurist, speaker, author of the Revolution of Self, um, founder of Astronaut, a space leader in the making. I'm very excited to introduce you all to Shannon Graham. And I picked this quote because I was watching a podcast where Shannon was explaining the overview effect. So thanks for coming on the show today. I'm excited to get inside of your head, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, uh, when you were young, were you thinking about taking people to space, or did that happen after? Like, it's not, doesn't seem like something natural.
Yeah, it's been something that I've been fascinated with for a long time. I had visions of going to space probably before I was 10 years old.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, right now, where are we as a culture as it relates to space? Are people going up there? At what level? And like, I
Mhm.
would like to introduce the concept to our audience who generally, right, we have entrepreneurs, executives, those attempting to just either not go out of business or make a bunch of money. How can space actually have a relationship with their awareness and their evolution? So, like, where are we at right now as a culture with space? Can we start there?
Yeah, well, where we are at now is we are currently capable of sending civilians to space. Um, Jared Isaacman just did the first civilian spacewalk just a couple of weeks ago. So far, Bezos has been to space, Branson has been to space, William Shatner has been to space, and Jared Isaacman has made two trips. He made the Inspiration 4, which was the first civilian space trip, and then he just did his most recent Polaris Dawn mission. Yeah, and there's a number of agencies. You have SpaceX, you have Blue Origin, you have Virgin Galactic, Axiom, the list goes on. So there's a handful of space agencies that are taking civilians to space currently. And yeah, so that is where things are at with that right now.
Who's this Jared? What was it?
Jared Isaacman.
What do you know what the inspiration behind that is?
Jared is just a fan of space like myself. He is an avid aviation guy, and when the possibility to go to space became available, he was one of the first people to not only jump on it, but also to bring other people along.
Is there demand?
There is demand. It's not extremely high right now for a number of reasons. The two biggest reasons that there's not a ton of demand right now is the price point is a little bit prohibitive right now. It's still fairly expensive to go to space, although that's rapidly democratizing.
Huh.
Um, and then it's just the idea of going to space in general, I think culturally has still a little bit of there's still some fear around that. Unfortunately, our civilization over the past 50 years has had some space tragedies, and so those tragedies kind of have stayed in our mind a little bit, and rightfully so. It was a big deal. However, the current technology is significantly different. The safety is higher than ever, and so I don't think there's actually any reason to have fear. I mean, obviously, there's always something that can happen, but um, I think what's going to happen is as more and more people do it, other people will look and see and be like, okay, this is not as scary. People are just kind of doing this now. It's just a thing. And then again, as it democratizes, it'll be like, oh, it's 50,000 to go to space. Well, that's not so bad. So it totally changes the perspective in those, two ways.
What ballpark of accessibility right now from an economic perspective? What's the
Right now, depending on what type of experience you want to have, it's anything from I mean, you can spend anything from I think it's about 250 to 300,000 all the way up to I think Mirazawa paid 100 million or so to go to the International Space Station. So
whoa,
that's
whoa.
obviously the very high end. But yeah, so there's a little bit of a range.
For the types of people that have gone, what do you think some of the commonalities of, because you've been studying people for over 2 decades with your coaching and advisory,
Yeah.
what types of people or character attributes do you think are the types that are even interested in this?
Well, you have to be obsessed with space, obviously, but on top of that, you have to be someone who's willing to be a pioneer.
Hmm.
You have to be willing to push some boundaries, and you have to be okay with a large degree of uncertainty because there's been so few civilians who have gone to space that that whole realm is still uncharted territory to a large degree. And so you have to be willing to step into that darkness and be okay with that.
Wow.
That's a very, very particular type of person, because most people are not that person. Most people don't want to go first. Most people don't want to take that much risk. Most people kind of desire some degree of comfort or certainty. So it's
Hmm.
very telling about the type of people who are going now. Um, I just this year launched the world's first space mastermind, for example, and
Wow.
the people who have raised their hand for that are they're all very different. They all come from different regions of the world, and yet they all have this characteristic of just massive tenacity and a bold vision to step into the unknown. And so, yeah, that would be probably one of the biggest differentiating or yeah, separating factors.
Is there a connection with entrepreneurship in your estimation?
Um, yeah, yeah. The I mean, Branson, Bezos, those guys own the space agencies, so there's an entrepreneurial aspect there. But yeah, and the other side of that is like because the price tag currently is what it is, most people who are
Hmm.
going to space just wouldn't be able to afford it unless they had some type of business ownership or something like that. On the other hand, unless you were someone that Jared brought, he was very gracious to bring some civilians with him, who just wouldn't be able to afford something like that on their own. So, um, and yet the people who went as a function of someone who was an entrepreneur. So, yeah, it's kind of like that right now.
What have been the experiences after the fact? Like the data, right? The psychological data.
Yeah, of the overview effect you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And even I want to understand that term more deeply. But yeah.
Yeah, well, the overview effect was kind of coined by a good friend of mine named Frank White. And um, he interviewed people who went to space that had this phenomenon of when you go to space and you see the Earth from space, you have this profound perspective shift. And that is that you see the Earth without any borders or without any boundaries. When you look at a map, all the lines that you see, where is America? Where is Canada? Where is Germany? Where is China? It's all made up. Those are all things that we just made up. None of that's actually real.
Wow.
And so there's this grand perspective shift of like, wow, we're all just one big human race. We all live here together. And and you see the earth against this backdrop of just vast nothingness, which reminds us that as of right now, Earth is our only home. And currently we extract resources from the planet faster than the planet has the ability to replenish them. And so it's getting people to kind of rethink our relationship to the planet, and how precious it is, and how important it is for us to live in harmony with that. So every single person, all
Huh.
600 and like 26 or so people right now that have been to space ever, have they all report this experience.
100%.
100%.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Would the analogy be like if you got, over your house and you saw in a helicopter, you saw your roof falling off? I'm just, it's
I
like, I
mean,
better
yeah,
repair that roof.
to a degree. It's kind of like if you saw if you looked at all at once an x-ray of all the people on Earth at the same time, all you would see is skeletons. You wouldn't see black or white or Mexican or this or that, like, right? You would just see people. And so when you look at Earth without any borders or without any boundaries, you see it the same way. There's no race. It's all just a human race.
That's now has that what's so exhilarating or exciting for you around that? Because it seems as though there's philosophical um, consequences of this experience.
Yeah, there's philosophical consequences for sure. My fascination is, so I'm in the business of impact. I have been in the business of making the world a better place for over 20 years. And specifically, the way that that looks in my world is that I work with leaders who are also visionaries that want to make the world a better place in some way. And my job is to help them get clear about what that way is and then reverse engineer a pathway to do it.
Hmm.
Now, that's cool. And we can only think of solutions based on the current level of consciousness that we have. And so, as Einstein said, you can only solve your problems with the current level of thinking that created them. So that means in order to create something new, in order to do something new, in order to create a new solution or a new degree of impact, you have to shift your consciousness, you have to shift your thinking. And so my hypothesis is that the overview effect has an 100% success rate. It has
Huh.
a profound perspective shift on every single person who experiences it, which is pretty profound. So my question is, what if you took somebody who already was not only an entrepreneur but was a visionary and had a deep desire to make the world a better place? My guess is that one of two things would happen. They already have a desire to make the world a better place in some specific way, so their capacity, their ability to do that will elevate and go to a completely out of the box new and different way, which is awesome because at the end of the day, what that means for the world is that it's bigger impact. Okay, that's one possible pathway. The other is that their perspective will be completely shattered, and they'll outthink themselves into something completely new and different, and that will allow them to create some type of new solution, like in the movie A Beautiful Mind, when he talks about
Mhm.
um, an original idea. An original idea is extremely difficult to come up with, but it's possible. It's possible to do that. You just have to create an environment to allow your brain to be able to do that.
And
So one of those two things will happen, and either way, it'll lead to some amazing shifts on the planet.
I think it was an interview with Dan. You said something to the effect of you can only work to your current level of awareness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, is that the experience of being physically, how do I say this?
Elevated.
Beyond the scope of our precondition, which is the environment, the earth.
Yeah.
So as if we're that's a coaching effect in a sense, like
Yeah,
We're outside of ourself in a sense.
that's
That's
right. I
profound.
mean,
Yeah, that
yeah, yeah, exactly right.
which okay, holy cow. I love that idea. How long do you think, or what's the pace right now of change for the democratization of opportunity, right? To go get
It's
it from 100 million down or 300,000
it's fast.
down.
It's
What do you
fast.
think?
It's fast. It's extremely fast. I think within the next 5 years, a trip to space could be less than 50,000 easily. Okay, here's the perspective exercise that I like to give people is because democratization really has to do with advancement of technology. So then if that's what we're really talking about, then let's talk about that. I want you to imagine the last 100 years of technological advancement compared to the last 1,000 years. The last 100 years by far is significantly more than the last 1,000. That's fair to say, right? Now I want you to imagine the last 10 years relative to the last 100. The last 10 years of technological growth. In the last 10 years, the growth of technology has been exponential compared to the last 90. So, if that's true, which it is, then the speed in which technology is advancing is becoming like quantum. And especially with AI, do you remember 5 years ago even having conversations about AI? No,
No.
no, nobody was even talking about it. I was talking about it just because I'm that guy and I'm a closet tech nerd, but like at large, no one was talking about it. And now, like everyone literally is having conversations with ChatGPT about literally anything that they can imagine. And they're likely talking with an AI that has an IQ that's at least what theirs is, if not higher. And
Wow.
so that's profound. That's profound. GPT-5 is coming out uh, within the next couple months. And GPT-5 is slated to be 100 times smarter than the current GPT-4o.
Whoa.
That dude, that's mind-boggling. And so over the next 5 years, technology is going to advance so rapidly that the democratization of space is going to happen very quickly.
I also wonder what effect, let's say that the overview effect has the outcome, expected even from this speculative conversation. Wonder what effect, because if people get in the air, I'm trying to say this clearly. If people get in the air and that changed the way that people are thinking, that could have a relationship with how quick technology evolves, being that our relationship with technology. Obviously, if we made it, right? Like more humans
Yeah,
that get up in the air and
well,
start
for
thinking
sure.
outside the
Think of it
box.
like this, okay? Let's say that GPT-5 was available right now. And let's say that you and I both had it. You and I were the only ones. GPT-5 is only as good as your ability to prompt it,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I know friends that have Chat GPT and they're like asking it like, third grade level questions. That's cool. That's okay. I've used GPT to help map out and reverse engineer like civilization design level type conversations. And
That's cool.
so technology is only as good as your ability to ask it questions. So with GPT-5 being 100 times smarter than GPT-4o, which is again, that's mind-boggling because GPT, as of right now, I believe has an IQ somewhere in the range of like a PhD, a doctor PhD level IQ.
Huh.
That's pretty phenomenal. So that's pretty phenomenal. Imagine 100 times that. That's challenging for me to even like comprehend. But to your point, it's only as good as your ability to prompt it. So the more and more people that I bring to space and give this elevated experience to, the more they're going to come back down to earth and go, oh, I know how to use this thing better now. And yeah, it'll be a game changer.
Yeah, wow. Like, um, sorry, I got a little jumbled there in my head. It's very exciting.
It's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay. This mastermind, right? What are some of the like? What are the types of people that you're looking for to be a part? Because maybe right now there are people listening and saying, "Hold on, I think Shannon just said there's actually a group of people that are gathering around this idea. They want to know about that right now. What is the purpose of that group? How could it potentially benefit those that are listening?"
Yeah. Well, so everything is better when we collaborate. Everything is better when we collaborate. Look at the greatest duos of all time, or even some of the greatest people that we look at currently in the world or in history that we think those individuals are so great. And almost all of them, like 99%, all have some other person in their corner. So, for example, the easy one is like Steve Jobs. Most people are like, wow, Steve Jobs was so amazing. Yeah, he was. But he also had Steve Wozniak. And without Wozniak, like there's just no way he could have gotten to where he did. And then there's like the cake taker, which is Elon. Elon is like the most popular person in the world right now. But there's no way he would even be close to where he is without his brother. The
Wow.
majority of people who know about Elon don't even know that he has a brother, but his brother has been by his side the entire way, supporting him, helping
Wow.
him, masterminding with him, funding some of his projects. Every single step of the way, Kimball has been part of the picture. But nobody knows that. Everyone thinks Elon is just this like guy who can do it all himself, and he can't. He hires people that are equally, if not more so, smarter than him to figure out the engineering problems for the rockets and the cars and the things. And so collaboration is by and large the best way to do things, even though the world kind of perpetuates this like solo, lone wolf type of thing. So my idea was, okay, so what if we take a handful of these people, of these visionary entrepreneurs, and we bring them to space and we give them this experience, and then they come back down, and not only can they take their individual mission and impact to a completely different level, but collectively they can synergize, they can collaborate, they can partner, they can share resources, right? They can do a number of those things. um, then what? Then what happens?
Hmm.
And the answer is we don't know because it's never been done before. But the obvious answer is it must be something profound. It
Yeah, yeah,
must it must be like by default. You can't add two numbers together and somehow have it equal something negative. And um,
yeah. Hmm.
so it's going to have to be exponentially awesome. And I am just curious enough to find out what's going to happen. Yeah. So the idea is to bring a small group. It's going to be 8 people. Um, and yeah, so the people that are really the best fit for that are visionary entrepreneurs, people who have a vision for a better tomorrow, and that desire to be in an intimate mastermind because, you've been around masterminds these days just are not what they used to be. Um, a good buddy of mine the other day called it a disaster mind, uh, which is
Yeah.
what most of them are, really.
Oh man, that's
Um,
yeah.
Masterminds in their most original form, when they first started in history, they were just a small group of people that all had high levels of skill or knowledge in certain areas, and they came together to pool that, and the rising tide
Hmm.
lifts all boats. So my desire is to bring us back to more of the essence of what a mastermind is. Um, and then the final part is they'd have to have that tenacity and the boldness to actually want to take that voyage because I've had conversations with a lot of badass entrepreneurs, very successful people, that just aren't quite the type of person who's ready to step into the darkness. They're the kind of person who's like, You
Wow.
guys go, let me know how it goes, and then if it's okay, then maybe I'll go. So and that's fine. That's the majority of the population. The law of diffusion of innovation is what it is for a reason. And so that's cool. They'll go when they're ready.
Do you think there could be some connection? Those that are listening that pursue meditative journeys, like whether
Uh-huh.
it's ayahuasca or like some type of medicinal like psychological whatever
Yeah,
neurological
psychedelics.
experience. I
Uh-huh.
wonder if that someone that's more leaning towards that would be another level of like closer to some, or is that not a connection because of the fear
It's
element?
I would say that it's a connection. If it's not a connection, it's certainly like a pathway for sure. If you're someone who is open to psychedelics and psychonaut experiences, then yeah, space is probably on your radar because you go to inner space and it's the equal opposite.
Yeah. Wow. Hey. As far as a actual like process of doing it, what's the current availability as far as okay, I'm listening, I'm in. I'd be willing to be bold enough to take that whatever that risk feels like to me. Am I going up there in a day, for a week, for an
Yeah,
hour? Uh,
good question. So the experience that I'm going to take people on is actually what's called an atmospheric balloon ride. So you go up in a balloon that's about the size of a football field, and the balloon goes all the way up to the very outer edge of space, or not the outer edge of space, but the outer edge of Earth, 100,000 feet up. So 100,000 feet above the planet. And so it goes up and then it comes down. That entire trip, as of right now, it takes about 8 hours.
so it's slow. It's like so you're climbing up, and obviously as you're climbing up, you're not asleep. You're awake. You're
Oh yeah,
experiencing this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
How do you breathe? Is this closed or you have a
It's
contraption
yeah, it's the same as an airplane essentially. It's
with windows and whatnot?
mhm.
And it would be a listener and set you and six other people.
It's me and seven other people.
And like, I got my remarkable, we're working on my business plan, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. So, we would all be in the pod together, kind of
wow.
brainstorming and masterminding. And then, once we get to I think it's about 4 hours, 4.5 hours, that's when you're
Wow.
at the peak, right? 100,000 feet up. You can see, the whole overview effect at that point. And yeah, and then you make your way back down.
And how many trips have, well, I guess the math would just be 620. Well, I guess not all the trips have eight people on them.
Yeah, I don't think that all the trips will likely have eight people on them, but
Have any balloons imploded in air?
there's I don't believe so. They've done rigorous testing, and as far as I know, all of the tests so far have been successful.
Wow. That's amazing. When's your
Yeah,
first trip planned? Is it 25 or 26?
26.
Do you have dates yet?
There's no dates yet.
Now, going back, just if I had the correct book, The Revolution of Self,
Yeah, that's right.
and you published that in 2011.
That's right.
What was the inspiration behind that?
Um, well, in the secretly in the word revolution is the word love. And so really the title of that book is The Love of Self. Um, the key to everything we want is our ability to get out of the old mindsets and habits and patterns that have kept us stuck or kept us in like a reactionary type of existence, and to move towards something that serves us better. But it's hard to get out of a box when you're inside the box and the instructions on how to get out of the box are on the outside of the box, unless somebody throws you a book on how to do that. And so I spent a lot of time figuring out how to kind of decouple from those old programs and the old paradigms and the old habits that kept me stuck, which is great. But then the question is, okay, well, now what do you do? How do you adopt something that serves you better, that is more empowering, that's more effective? And so I kind of created some technologies for that. And so the book really kind of is a blueprint for that.
How does someone listening know or can begin to grapple with they're ready for a coach?
Um, well, a coach is there's a layer, there's a degree of success, there's a degree of results that are not possible without a coach. That's why every high level professional person, whether you're a singer or a sports player or what have you, that's why they all have coaches. The best of the best of the best have coaches, because they know that there's just a degree of blind spots that we all have, that no matter how fast you run, you can't outrun your own blind spots. And so for the person who's kind of desiring that level of whatever it is, fulfillment, achievement, success, self-awareness, and they're aware, they're self-aware enough to know that they can't get there by themselves, right? There's not a single gold medal winning Olympic athlete that didn't have a coach. I think technically there might be one in history, but
Huh.
obviously that's the anomaly, right? Like, they all had a coach, and for a good reason, because there's just a degree that we just can't get past ourselves, right? Iron sharpens iron. We have to have someone else to help us to elevate, whether it's mindset or skill set or both.
Hmm. What questions would you advise our listeners when interviewing for that medium or that significant third party or
Uh,
ways of looking at it, if not specific questions or
well, I
due
think that,
diligence?
yeah, I think it's due diligence is okay. Um, whether someone has helped someone else do what you want to do, that's good. But I think the thing is this: if you're going to hire a coach, that's someone that you're in a relationship with, and that's someone that
Hmm.
you can only get out of that relationship what you put into it. So it doesn't actually matter how good the coach is if you are not willing to be vulnerable, if you are not willing to lean in, if you're not willing to pick yourself up off the ground when things get hard. Um, you know, Rocky had an amazing coach in the movie, and he had that spirit that when he got knocked down, he was willing to get back up. And so it's when you take someone who is willing to be vulnerable, willing to lean in, willing to take the hits and get back up, and you combine that with a really amazing coach, then you have the recipe for something truly
Hmm.
amazing. So I say all of that to say, again, like Mike Tyson and his coach, Mike had a phenomenal career in boxing. He's arguably one of the greatest. Arguably the greatest ever. He would be nowhere without his coach. Customato was like his father, and
Hmm.
so my point is, it's a relationship. And so a lot of what people don't think about it, a lot of people, when they think about coaching, they're like, well, is the coach qualified, or have they gotten great results before? That's all good to know, but really is like, how do you feel with that person? Do you trust them? Does the relationship feel strong? Does it
Hmm.
feel like a good relationship? Because that's, even if the person has gotten phenomenal results for other people, if you it doesn't click, or like you are not, if you can't bring that other side of the equation to the picture, then it just kind of falls apart.
Nietzsche, like when the student is ready, the master will appear.
Yeah, that's right.
Hmm. Um, you're in California.
Austin.
What is that a brimming with the coaching culture or the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial spirit?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Now, what about attributes or characteristics of the visionaries that you've worked with over the years? What would you say are, because that one thing I'd like to maybe from a self-awareness standpoint for the audience is to recognize if they're on track or off track. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest one is simply that they have a deep desire to make the world a better place. They typically have a fairly high degree of clarity about how to do that. Uh, they've likely done a good amount of personal development already, and they're at that stage that I mentioned, which is like they know that they are their biggest bottleneck, and so to hire somebody to help with perspective or mindset or skill set or whatever, they realize it's just like that's just the next step. Um, and yeah, and again, there's a tenacity of like, when the entrepreneurs that I work with only take on moonshot level projects, like really high level impact projects, which with that level of project, you're bound to come up against adversity and challenges and questions that you just don't know the answers to. And so it takes a thick skin to play that game. It takes a lot of tenacity to show up to that
Hmm.
again and again and again and again and get to the other side because there's no blueprint for it. When you do something that's never been done before, you can't rely on anyone's expertise or anyone's perspective. It's literally never been done, and so you have to be willing to step into the darkness and pioneer that territory by yourself. And so yeah, there's a huge difference between someone who's willing to be an entrepreneur and just like kind of funnel hack it and just figure out what other people have done to be successful and get hire some people to that know marketing and kind of duplicate what's worked. And and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's great because your product or service can get to more people and that benefits them and you can provide for your family and your community and whatever. I'm not downplaying that at all. I'm just saying that they're completely different calibers of people, but it's just totally different breed of person. Because you kind of have to be crazy to like knowing it's like UFC. It's like my job today, like most people wake up and like go to work. My job is like I'm gonna get in this ring and this person is gonna physically attack me and like borderline try to kill me. Like you're consciously signing up for that. Like you have to be a little bit crazy.
Yeah, how do those that act out that drama view or relate to money? Are
Help me
there
understand that
like
question.
how does that type of person view money, relate to money? Is it different than is there a distinction between that type of person
Yeah,
and
I
how
mean
they view money than
yeah,
the
by
general
and
person?
yeah, for sure. By and large, they view money as a fuel source. They view money as a resource for building, a building resource. Because really that's what it is.
Do you think that is that have a connection with risk or the ability to take on risk, or is it even not even how they're conceiving risk
Yeah, yeah,
or the
it's
concepts of risk are different?
no, the concept of risk is totally different. It's like Elon. Elon, there's no risk in his mind. It's like either the rocket blows up or it doesn't. But either way, we're moving forward. Like there's no risk. The idea of risk only exists if there's something to lose. But there's nothing to you can never lose if you never quit.
It's like the purpose of money is for action, not to
Yeah.
encumber it, not to encumber it. Like, and there's this natural
Yeah, the purpose of
uh,
money is to set it free in intelligent ways.
yeah, that's well, yeah, I like that. As opposed to it starting to because it seems like the more money can condition us. Like now I'm like I don't want to lose what I've got having had none or had lack or feeling
Sure.
an absence of resources. Now I've got an abundance and the irony or the paradox is I'm unwilling to deploy it.
Yeah.
I found that
Well,
happen to me, and others.
that's not the money conditioning us. That's our past conditioning us because our past is saying, "Hey, you know what it's like to have nothing. That sucks. Let's not ever do that again. So there's that fear there. But the people who have a true abundance mindset, I mean, dude, Elon could lose everything tomorrow, and how long would it take him to get everything back? Like no time, because that's just who he is. So loss only really exists in a zero sum environment where the perception of loss is like absolute, but it's never absolute because you can always start again. And dude, Elon blew up like 4 rockets. Most people would have been packing it in at the first one, and he was like, all right, let's keep going. And because to him it wasn't, he didn't lose anything. Like, yeah, you lose a lot of resources and time and money and effort that goes into
Mm.
building it, but as far as like the end result, you haven't lost as long as you don't give up.
I wonder, Elon's example almost has our mind share, is if like he's almost popularizing what's always been among us, like these types of people that have always been among us, but not
Yeah.
necessarily either fully aware of, or made or understood, or I don't know. I'm just curious. If that's just a thought that comes to mind. Like Elon gets a lot of the mind share, right? But there could be a lot of, what's the likelihood that there's a percentage of the populace that relate
Yeah,
to the world in this way, that we're lucky
there's
to
a
have them.
well, we're very lucky to have Elon. And there's a lot of Elon-ish type people out there, and the world just doesn't know about them. And that's because some of them desire to work quietly in the background and just be unknown. And that's because some of them just haven't quite hit their stride. But yeah, there's plenty of people like that, and he's inspiring people to be more like
Mm.
him, not really like him, but like themselves, that are in a way like him, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, yeah. Well, like there are different foundations to his capitalism, or
Yeah,
proposition. He's operating from a different blueprint, or
yeah.
maybe at least from our concept of what business is about. Is it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, look at, he has open source on pretty much everything. Like there's no like legitimate business person that really would think that's a good idea, but Elon thinks it's a good idea because he understands collaboration. He understands the bigger, the higher frequency, the higher consciousness of planetary advancement, because it's not about him at the end of the day. It's about the agenda. So if he can open source something and I come along, and because he spent all the time and money and resources to get that piece of technology to that level, that means that I don't have to do it. And maybe I have a certain perspective or expertise that can take that to a completely different level. And now, because I didn't have to put all the money into making my own or getting other people and the resources and blah 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 to get up to that same level, we just literally bent time, we collapsed time, and now we've fast forwarded so I can contribute my genius to this thing, and then maybe the thing quantum leaps because of that. And Elon's smart enough to know that it's not about him, it's about the end goal.
Well, and what about this? Like, and then that would make me think that he's confident enough is in his ability to compete, where if he's collaborative, that would preempt a cooperative competition, meaning now you become his competitor because it was open source, but the cooperation of competitors creates more value, because if like
Yeah,
if he's like resting on his laurels,
right.
then he better have that trademark,
Well,
because he's
yeah,
like the
but
king, like,
he's not
I have the patent.
he doesn't want to be the king. He actually wants to be the dumbest person in the room, but he is
Wow.
the smartest person in the room simply because he's willing to do things that no one's ever done before. But that's not that's so what? It's like that's cool, and it's more than anything, what I genuinely believe Elon is doing, and I think he knows this, is he's simply just calling everyone up to a higher level of excellence. The Tesla car company is the most valuable car company in the world. Let's be clear, not the most valuable electric car company in the world, because that would be kind of like a silly thing to say. The most valuable car company in the world. That's insane. relative to how long Tesla's been around compared to some of these legacy car companies that have been around 100 years, that doesn't make any sense. SpaceX has NASA, the world's largest space agency, pay them because their rocket technology is better. So NASA wants to utilize SpaceX's technology. NASA's budget is like over $1 billion a month. That doesn't make any sense. But it makes
Whoa.
perfect sense because Elon is obsessed with innovation. He's obsessed with pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits. It's nothing is ever good enough because he knows it can be better. He knows that, okay, we thought of it this way, but that's because our mind was like at this level. Let's go to this level and imagine something different. And so, to your point, what that does, it doesn't just elevate Elon's companies, although obviously that's a clear side effect. What it really does is it makes other people go, oh, that bastard just raised the bar. So he's forcing collaboration because he's forcing people to play a completely new game. We can't get away with internal combustion engines anymore. I guess we got to play this electric game because Elon is just killing everybody, literally. Um, so okay, I guess we're going to do that. So now they're forced to play at this new level, and what that's going to do is it's going to force new innovation.
Oh,
It's going
that's
to
so
force,
genius.
yeah. So healthy,
Oh,
healthy um healthy collaboration. Some people probably wouldn't call it collaboration; they would call it competition. But really, it's collaboration. Healthy collaboration and/or competition forces innovation. Because if you and me are in competition, and you're like, "Well, what about this idea?" and I'm like, "Well, what about that idea?" and then I take your idea and then I build on it, where I innovate it, and then it's like boom, 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 back and forth. That's called synergy. That's called synergy. And so Elon is just priming the game for something better.
to go back to your overview phenomenon, hard, how we play together, how we cooperate, because, well, how we compete reveals our values.
Yeah.
How we conceive the world has a relationship with acting out our values. Like when you said something earlier in the conversation about when you go over the planet and you see that there aren't different borders. Now I'm looking at humanity as humanity. You know, you're human, I'm human. There's less separating us. The more separations could increase conflict, like deconstructive conflict.
Yeah.
We compete better when we're,
Well, yeah. It's look at some of the stupid stuff that trips us up, like race. What a silly thing to get caught up in. Like that doesn't make any like
yeah, we should shed that skin. That
that's
it's like
such
a snake. Yeah.
but well, I mean, think about it. It's really so dumb. It's really dumb for people to get hung up on that. Like, oh, because that person looks different, I should think less of them. Well, that person's like primary operating system is literally identical to yours. Their needs and desires is probably like 98% identical to yours. They want good things for their family. They want to do good things in the world. They want to probably do good things for their community. Like, dude, you're talking about yourself. Like when here's the kicker: the similarities vastly outnumber the differences, but people make the difference wider than the largest chasm of the similarities, and so it creates conflict, and it's silly um, until something is only works until it doesn't. Right? Buckminster Fuller was like, "Don't try to figure out something. Don't fight against what is. Build a model that makes the existing model obsolete." And so, um, that's what the real intelligent people do. They don't put their fist in the air and say like internal combustion is bad. They just quietly go build something that's significantly better. And so Elon did. And the more you
Wow.
do that, the more people get on board with that. And again, it forces that new level of game to be played, and and everyone benefits.
What have been some of you mentioned Buckminster Fuller, some of your influences over your career?
Well, Bucky Fuller is certainly one of them. The way he thought about just how things work, and um, yeah, his approach to kind of like engineering from an innovative perspective is profound. Nikolai Tesla obviously is like, that guy was just on a completely different level. Um,
Book about him. I gotta read.
yeah, those are some of the big ones for sure. Yeah,
Any living people that you'd say, hey, these are, you know, additional to Elon that are really exemplifying some of the values that you hope to, bring into the world in respect to this astronaut project?
um,
Because the reason I asked that specific is like,
yeah,
where are the leaders, right? Like
yeah,
the time we live in, who should we follow? I follow a lot of people for various reasons. Like I want to see
yeah,
what's going on in the world.
yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
any people living, you'd say, hey,
I don't, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's probably an opportunity to do less of that.
hmm.
What people tend to do is like collect leaders, kind of like trading cards. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
it's like they feel pride that they follow or they know of all these kind of thought leaders and people like that, which sometimes can be a really convenient and tricky way to not make any real progress. It's a little bit like guilt. Alan Watts has a
Yeah,
great thing about guilt. Guilt is one of the most useless human emotions because it never actually produces anything useful. No severity or no duration of guilt has ever somehow translated into something useful or positive. And so, um, yeah, sometimes we kind of get a little obsessed with like, man, there's so many profound people out there. But the person that's looking for those profound people is equally profound, but only until they have the time and space to realize it.
yeah. In closing, what would you say someone that is really searching this, they want to act out a better version of themselves, start that journey, like right when this is done, um, that this episode ends, where would you advise them to start, or maybe to stop doing some things?
Well, I think the fundamental question is this. The hardest question on the planet for people to answer is also the simplest and most fundamental, which is what do you want? That's the hardest question on the planet for people to answer. And the reason is because most people um, either don't believe that they are worthy of having what they want, or they just simply don't believe it's possible to have what they want. So when you ask them that question, the majority of the time they will answer that question by telling you what they don't want. So, like, for example, if you're talking about someone's career, you're like, oh man, what do you want in your career? And they'd be like, oh man, if my boss would just stop being so much of a jerk, or if like I didn't have to do this like nonsense work. Or like relationships, man, what do you really want in your relationship? It's like, man, I wish my wife would stop nagging me, or I would like, right? They talk about what they don't want, which is ironic because they haven't actually answered the question. What do you want? That's the question. And so I think the opportunity for anyone listening to this is to give yourself the time and space to ask yourself that question. What do I want? But to answer it as honestly as possible. That's the tricky part. Because, first of all, you have to answer it by saying what you actually want, not what you don't want. So that's hard because most people, by default, it's like a knee jerk reaction. Most people are going to be like, man, well, what I don't want is. So you have to be able to have the self awareness to pause and go, no, 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 we're not going to say that. Let's really tune in. What do you want? And then there's always varying degrees of what you want. So, for example, I might say, Jay, do you want $1 million? And you'd say, yeah. And then my next question would be, why? Why? What's the point? What would you do with it? And you might say something like, well, I might buy my parents a house, or I might build some schools in Africa, or I might whatever. Okay, that's cool. So what if I did those things for you? Then would you be happy? Yeah, right. So in that case, okay, it's not really the money, it's the school in Africa. So sometimes we have to challenge our own beliefs about what we want, because a lot of times there's a deeper truth underneath what we really want. And so you have to be able to give yourself the time and space to really sit with that and really kind of pioneer that, to ultimately arrive at the truth, because that's the only way you can really make change, is when you see the forest for the trees, when you really see things as they are, not how you think they should be, or not something that you think would be good, but really it's something else.
Hmm.
So yeah, really that honesty is very sobering, but it's also very empowering.
People that are listening want to reach out to you, retain you into their life. Best way to contact you and go into that application process.
Good old Instagram.
Sh Shannon Graham with two N's.
The Shannon Graham.
Brother, this was awesome. I'm excited to re-listen and challenge our listeners to pay very close attention, re-listen, think about the future because yeah, these are the conversations that matter. I'm excited to get that number from 626. Well, to see you get it from 626 to into the thousands. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah,
All for
thank you so
listening.
much.
Please follow Shannon Graham, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.